Starting in 3, 2, 1. Good evening. This is Animal on Control. Welcome to the voice chat. These calls are recorded for uploading to social media, and by joining a call, you are consenting to being recorded. Anyone wishing to join a call should email me at animaloncontrol@gmail.com, and I will reply with instructions. Tonight, I have Chef Mutt Meat. What is up?
Hey, how's it going?
Never better. I'm just living the dream. In fact, you know what? I need to knock on wood with both hands. I've not heard the mutt across the street since last Friday night. Now,
nice.
if that's not a win, like what is? Well, I'm telling you, like being nasty to dog nutters, it can gain traction. It can get some real results. So, I mean, it's uptight. It's interesting. I went out, ran some errands the other night, and I saw a couple of them outside. And folks know how uptight that is. But I came back and they just ignored me and I ignored them, which is fine. But in any case, so tonight's topic, and I'm going to open a call up to other folks in about an hour or so, but the two of us are going to discuss dog critique art, which could take all kinds of forms, memes, physical artwork, anti-dog or anti-dog owner, books, short stories, poems, graphic novels, perhaps even films and TV shows if someone has the means. I know I don't. Back when I got into the space, I wrote some vignettes, not really short stories, but just some idea outlines involving some, sort of like, anti-dog cult critic, book ideas. And, many folks saying, oh, yeah, write the book. But it's a big project. I didn't have it in me at the time. But, since then I've had more ideas. And it's something worth talking about, definitely, because all you get in the media are positive depictions of, dogs in society, dogs in the family, dog ownership, and so forth. And most of these things are, if they're not outright lies, it's deceptive propaganda. And I think that it needs to be presented in a different way. And I think it's an underserved market. I think that there's a demand here that's not being met. I think there's a lot of good points to be made that people aren't making. And I think if it's done in a way that's sort of presentable or consumable by the mass market, like most people, we could get a lot of traction in this space. And that's just my thoughts at a very high level. We could drill down into the details. So
yeah, my husband is making video games. And in each of his games, he's released 2 so far, working on a third and fourth one. And the last one he made is about knights fighting giant snails. But in every single one of his games, you have to kill a dog in order to progress with the game. So, which is great. So,
where can we access these applications?
He's released a few on Steam. You have to go through some type of approval process. I'll have to ask him, but I can actually link you a demo to one of his games called Punch It. And you start off with, it's like Bop It, but you beat up people. So you beat up a person, then you beat up a brain, and then once you finish that, you unlock the bonus level, which is where you beat up a dog. So if anyone complains, they're like, "Oh, you're promoting animal cruelty." It's like, "Oh, so I'm not encouraging domestic abuse by also beating up a person in the same
Yeah.
game." So
Or
that's an excellent point to bring up.
yeah, or brain abuse by beating a person. That would be fun. That's funny because you know what it is that particularly if folks get into the brain or into the game itself, it sort of, normalizes, going through the process. Because typically you think about, violent video games, it's a lot of times, you're killing people.
Yeah.
And but it seems that like, yeah, killing a dog, even if it's for a good reason, it's just, well, that's just unthinkable. You can't do that. It's just wrong,
Right.
Right.
And I've read a lot of articles before on people who complain about needing to kill dogs in video games, like in Outlast. I haven't played Outlast or The Last of Us. You have to kill dogs because they will kill you if you don't kill
Right.
them first. They're like,
Right.
"Oh, I hate being able to kill a dog." It's like, "Oh, but you don't hate killing people?"
Right. Or some
So
other animal,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
They even have like, hunting games where, you're shooting
Oh,
deer, bear, or, boars or whatever. And, it's a lot of, folks will use that for, training for actual hunting expeditions. So, and it's sort of perhaps something like that would get people over the, I don't know what the word to use is, but it would sort of get them past the, I don't know, the initial resistance to doing something like that.
for
You
sure,
know,
for sure.
and, oh yeah, initially, we've always talked about, you see these videos, like real life videos of a dog attack, a dog is mauling somebody or a person or perhaps another animal. And it seems like people aren't really taking it seriously. They're trying to shoo the dog away. They're
Hmm.
spraying it with window cleaner or swatting it with a fly swatter. I'm like, break that, grab a chainsaw. I mean, just take the problem seriously. But yeah, people don't do it. There's this huge. That's the word I was going to use. There's this huge inhibition to using any kind of force against a dog.
Yes, definitely. And
Yeah.
I totally agree with having more implementations uh, where it gets rid of that initial resistance, just like what you said. And
Yep.
it's funny because they are doing the complete opposite with cops. They're trying to train cops not to shoot dogs, and they have these stupid little simulations. It's like, so you just want them to get their throat ripped out by a dog?
Yep. I guess. You
So
know.
one of
Well, that's the thing is like what they're doing is they're actually, I mean, they being, the dog cultists, are actually pushing to make the problem worse, right? So, do we need the body count to get higher? Is that like a good outcome? And not so much as that, I mean, they don't care how many people get killed. I mean, dogs can kill everybody and they'd be fine with it. But at least like politically and socially, is that good for their movement? Because it just adds to statistics that people are going to use to, restrict dog ownership.
Oh, yes, that's a great point
Yeah.
because it doesn't make them look good if there's a huge rise in people and police officers getting attacked and killed by dogs.
Oh, sure, sure.
That's
Well, interestingly, though, we were talking about that. It actually came up in the last I Hate Dogs video. And again, he was mentioning statistics. That's the thing is people keep reciting these statistics over and over again. 4 in the United States, 4.7 million bites, a million hospitalizations, 30,000 needing reconstructive surgery, probably 100 or so dead, but that number is probably way understated. But those statistics have been repeated over and over and over again for, I mean, probably longer than I've been in this space, 15 years. But you're thinking that, okay, in the last 15 years, there's way more dogs in circulation, plus our, legal and public policy apparatus is way more tolerant of these things. We have way more dangerous dog recycling, way more fighting dog proliferation, way more dogs generally, way more tolerance of that kind of behavior. It's got to be twice that. I mean, I'm just guessing, but it's got to be way more than those numbers. All those statistics are old, and they almost date back to like a prior era almost. But the point is that, if people knew the real numbers, I think things might change. But yeah, they just want to sort of add to. It's like, fine, let's not shoot these things. Let's let them just run around and keep, killing kids and other animals. That will make, what will that increase Fido's stature? I don't think so. What just sort of goes to show how stupid these people are.
Yeah. Like whenever I mention statistics, I always say dogs kill a reported 4.7 million people. And then somewhere along the lines, I mentioned that only one out of every 3 or 4 dog bites are actually reported. So you got to
Yep.
take whatever number you get and multiply it by 3 or 4.
Triple it.
That's
Yep.
insane.
And triple it. And probably the deaths too. It's interesting. I was on the Banned Pit Bulls Reddit, and they reported it was a man in New Jersey died the other day, as he'd been mauled back in June and sort of lingered in the hospital and just passed away. But is he going to be, listed as a dog bite related fatality, or is it going to be, I don't know, sepsis or some weird, if they can attribute it to something else, or was it, heart attack or, something other than the dog attack. Like they're always going to try to attribute something else. But I would say, yeah, I mean, if he hadn't been attacked by dogs, he'd still be alive, right? So the dog bites was approximate cause of death in that case. But who knows? It probably won't be attributed that way. And that's another, aspect of this.
Right, and that's not even including all the people that have died from dogs that don't include a bite. So if a dog charges and they run over an elderly woman and cause her to fall and die from the fall, they'll just say, oh, she died from a fall. They won't mention that a fucking 400-pound dog was off leash and charged her.
Oh yeah. I got I know some of my old blog commenters brought that up. It's like, I mean, just like, knocking somebody over on the pavement is a pretty serious matter. And that's, one thing they being, dog propagandists do is they always play it down. Like anything short of a total dismemberment is no big deal. Just forget it. Everybody just needs to move on, right? It's not anybody's fault except the victim, right?
And they get mad when I apply that same logic to dogs that get themselves deleted. It's like, oh, the leopard didn't mean to kill the dog. It's nobody's fault here.
It's just a leopard being a leopard. Come on,
Leopards maul dogs. It's what they do.
It's what they do, exactly. Pursuant to that, though, I wanted to talk about, because the other night we were talking about, I mean, most people are focused on changes in the legal and the political system. And that doesn't seem to be gaining a lot of traction. I think it's because, law and politics is downstream of culture. And the culture is very, very pro-dog, generally speaking. In other words, the tendency is, or the incentive or the pressure is to put, dogs and dog ownership in the best light possible. Like it's part of what I call like it's complementary, mutt theory. So I think it would be helpful. Again, you want to change the culture first. And that sort of flows down into the changes. So you're thinking like, well, how do you change the culture? And a lot of times, that's done with art, particularly, I mean, at least historically, with writing, books and so forth. I know many times in these chats I brought up what I would call message fiction, like, say, 1984, The Jungle, Uncle Tom's Cabin, right? And these are all fictional novels. These were not, these were not biographies or nonfiction. These were, fictional novels, but they caused people to really change their attitude or a mindset towards a particular thing, right? So if you take, because I've read 1984, I've read actually most of Orwell's stuff. I've read The Jungle. If folks who don't know, The Jungle was written by Upton Sinclair, and I forget, it was like late 1800s, early 1900s. It sort of showed the brutal nature of or conditions of being a working class person in that time frame. And it led to, worker safety laws, particularly like food purity laws and things like that. Actually, because Teddy Roosevelt read The Jungle, apparently, and he said, like, okay, we need to make some changes here. Okay. It's it turns out, I don't know if it was even that an accurate depiction of what was going on, but it did result in a lot of changes. Another book that's important is Uncle Tom's Cabin. And I've never read Uncle Tom's Cabin. It was written around 1850. And, it was a novel. It wasn't a true story, but it did, accurately depict the brutal nature of slavery. And, people read that book and they're like, okay, we need to change this. This is not good. Right. I remember too, I never read that book, but I remember my stepdad read it. And I guess I could have read it because he and my mom would bring books in. I read some of these books, some of them I didn't, but he said it was a really moving book. Like he said, he's like, wow, this, he was not pro-slavery by any means, but you could see this was something that really moved people, and again, it shifted the culture away from the practice. Okay. So,
yeah, because
sorry,
fiction fiction is a good way to get people aware or to raise awareness about a particular topic, just like what you were saying. So what's nice about being in this anti-dog space is we can very easily inspire events in a fiction story that we write, inspire them by true events, because these things that actually happen are wilder than fiction.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah, like I always say, some of these things, you can't make these things up.
Right.
And I think that, what's interesting to me in this space and what kind of motivates me to do this is the unjust nature of it, of dogs in society, because dogs and dog people are allowed to do things and get away with them that nothing else is. A lot of times, sometimes dog nuts will inject, propagandists will inject themselves in our space. Be like, oh, what about this? Or what about that? Like, forget about that. Nothing else would be allowed to do this. Nothing. Even that, what got me too is just the other day, maybe it was yesterday, the day before, AAiH Dogs put out that video. It was about that. It was an Amazon driver. And this guy, look, the homeowner ordered an item, it was packaged. All this guy is doing is delivering it, right? So he's really technically, he's an invited guest, correct? Okay, that by ordering a service, you've granted, permission for those people to be on your property. So it goes on this Belgian, Malinois, credit to Alien Drone, basically rips the guy's calf off. This is horrible. It's like this guy's probably like maimed for life, right? He wasn't doing anything wrong. He's just doing his job. It's 100% legal. He was not violating the rights of the homeowner or the mutt. Not that mutts have rights in any way. And you know what? There's nothing's going to come of this. The home, I don't know about the dog. The homeowner's not going to prison. They belong in prison. but it's not going to happen. And the unjust nature of this is an outrage. And that's what motivates me. And that's what I want to communicate to people, because this whole, like, matrix, this mutt matrix paradigm, it's unjust, it's undemocratic, it's anti-civilized. Okay, it's, what's a word if you hate humans? A misanthropic. It's a horror. It's like I said, it's an outrage, and it should outrage every, like, fair-minded or civilized-minded person. Yet it persists, and not only does it persist, it continues to get worse. And I think it's because not enough people have been woken up to that yet.
And a lot of people that get attacked, they don't want to charge the dog owner because they'll say, "Oh, I love dogs," and the dog is just doing its job.
Yep.
So one day the wrong person is going to get mauled, and they're going to sue the shit out of that person.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the lawsuits come up, but and I'm all for suing. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm all for suing dog owners. I'm telling everybody, if you have a case, sue them. But that goes back, pursuant to what you just said, though, is that not enough people are really willing to see something like that through. I prosecuted a couple of lawsuits. And one thing I've learned is, if you're going to pursue something like that, you have to really mean it. You have to be not just prepared to, but actually go for the proverbial jugular, right? You don't show your adversary any mercy. But the problem is, too many people do. They say, "Oh, yeah, I don't want to put that person out of their house. I don't want to, bankrupt them." And there's like way too much sympathy for these people. And I'm not even talking about, some people talk about extra legal means. It's totally legal to sue somebody in a bankruptcy, 100%. And you sue somebody, you can, if you get a judgment, you can execute on that. You can garnish wages. You can levy bank accounts. You can confiscate all kinds of real property, like tow cars away. I know, I've been in that space. It's not easy, but the problem is, it's not easy to do. It's expensive and time consuming and difficult. I mean, more needs to be done in terms of, the state, and also self-help options. But yeah, it's, but even with that is, even allowing for the, lawsuits, right? So it's like, okay, you can get some justice in the civil court, but is it really justice? Like, if somebody with a known dangerous dog kills a kid, does a lawsuit really set that right? I mean, it's better than nothing, but does it really set it right? Is that actual justice?
I think if there's something being done to make sure this doesn't happen again, but it never is. They usually give the dog back, or if they euthanize the dog, the people get another one.
They get another dog. And that's the thing is that, well, ideally, that behavior needs to be criminalized. It needs to be, provided it sort of goes, actually, now we're sort of getting off topic into public policy, which is, one of my favorite things to talk about. But that, the insistence of dog cultists and their, enablers, their sympathizers is, oh, you can't arrest somebody for something the dog did, right? That's just wrong. But that goes back to the double standard. They don't extend that flexibility to people who have other species of pets, like those Orlando snake people. The pet kills the kid, and both of them got 12 years in prison. But if the dog kills a kid, it's like, poor them, Fido got put down and everybody just needs to move on. No, we need to stop giving these people all these special protections, all this extra consideration. They don't deserve it. Okay, and it's totally unjust. But going back to art, I think that, any art we pursue should be, and you could do this in video games too. I hadn't even really thought of that, but you want to, again, if you want to make, change the culture, you got to get people, well, you got to get them interested. You got to get them, pissed off. You want to make them care about it. And I think, a way to do that is to focus on that injustice, because that is what gets people wound up, particularly like, a murderer who just walks away. People don't like to see that. It gets people outraged. So, the thought I had was, I had some book ideas, and who knows, these book ideas, great you brought up the video games, because I hadn't really thought about that too much, but a lot of people play games, and a lot of these newer games have a storyline. It's not like Pong or Space Invaders, where you actually have these sort of long, complex story arcs that you can program into these things. But I wanted to, relate some stories, some fictional stories that, emphasized these injustices, right? Like, dog owner kills kid and walks away and nothing's done about it. And, that should outrage any civic or justice-minded person. But what I wanted to do was, or the thought I had, was actually last decade, maybe 10 years ago, was I had some book ideas that, illustrated that topic. I had, two of the three did. I had 3 book ideas. They could be, short stories, full-length novels, perhaps even movie ideas, although I don't have the wherewithal to produce something like that. So what I had was 3 basic ideas. One was, it was sort of a Punisher type revenge story. And we brought this up the other day, and I'm thinking that something like that may actually have happened already. Remember, we were talking about it maybe a month or a month and a half ago. There was a situation, and I think New York State, where somebody kidnapped, a dog owner, right? He kidnaps a dog owner and burns the dog owner's pit bull to death in front of him. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And because we actually, you and I were discussing that, and we're thinking like, okay, very likely. I mean, the thing is, we don't know anything else about it, but it would be fascinating to do so. What was the actual motive behind that? Why? Because, I mean, that is hardcore stuff, right? You're going to kidnap your neighbor. You're going to tie that guy to a chair and burn his dog to death in front of him. That is very, very personal. That's not something that somebody just does, particularly because the dog owner in question, they owned other dogs of other breeds. They had cats, they had rabbits. Why the pit bull? Why not one of these other pets? And, what we could come up with was, it's very, very likely that there was an incident involving the pit bull, right? Because the dog had, perhaps attacked people or other animals. And as usual, nothing was done about it. And the guy said, you know what? If the police and animal control won't handle it, I will. I am going to dispense justice. And that's what he did. So it'd be interesting to write a book along those lines, or maybe even taking it to another level, where you have something like that, say, escalates into a mass shooting or a bombing, perhaps. And like I said, I'm actually surprised something like that hasn't happened already. But who knows? It may have, because it seems like, particularly with that New York guy, the story just died. Like, we don't know anything else about it. It was just, you say, well, this happened and it was swept under the rug and everybody needs to forget about it. But I would love to know more about that. I really would.
Sounds like they're keeping something from us.
Yeah. There's more, definitely more to it. And I'm not necessarily endorsing that behavior,
Right.
but because, we're public speakers, we're going to say, look, rule one, don't break the law. But what we can say is that, particularly the message sent to dog people is that if you trample the rights of others, right? So, if we have this ridiculously, slanted or tilted, legal paradigm or public policy set up, right, where everything is rigged in favor of dogs, sooner or later, something's going to happen to correct that discrepancy. Like, it's not going to go on forever. Sooner or later, the rights of people are going to assert themselves. And I wanted to write about that. I wanted to write a fictional story about, and not just a dog attack, but the whole scenario. You've got dogs terrorizing a neighborhood, people being attacked and other animals being killed, property being destroyed, a neighborhood on lockdown for months. Okay. Because that's the other thing. It's not just the killings and so forth. It's a quality of life issue. Like, people it's a horror movie scenario. People are living in fear because of these things. And not just because people are allowed to own them, but they're allowed to own them and do or not do whatever they want. You want to turn Fido and Rover loose to terrorize the neighborhood? Fine, go ahead. Nobody will do anything. Right, unless somebody does do something like delete the dogs. Oh, now the authorities get involved. Like I said, it's anarcho-tyranny. It's a huge double standard, and it should be an outrage to any civic-minded person. Yet these problems happen. They happen all over the world. So it'd be interesting to write a fictional story about that, perhaps embellished, where you have an outcome that's like really bad, like somebody who's got their shit together totally loses it. And I mean, like, totally loses it, like in a way, like pursuant to, like, say, The Punisher or perhaps a Rambo movie, where they just, these dog nutters, they push the wrong person too far. I think it would be a very compelling story. And it would be a great message. Not that, like, okay, the protagonist or main character, you want to say, yeah, they broke the law, they went too far, but they would be sympathetic. You would say, okay, maybe they didn't do the right thing, but you sympathize because you have somebody whose, life has been just destroyed by these things. Their kid is killed. Their face is ripped off. They lost their job. Dog nutters have vandalized their house and their car, and they just completely lose it. And I think that would be a really compelling story.
Yeah, for sure. The one that I've had is kind of going along these lines, where it's a group or like a trio of vigilantes that go to dog shelters and just shoot every single dog. And I know that, I know that some people might say, like, oh, so you're encouraging people to do that. But no, there's going to be something in place where it will be kind of a warning of what happens when you break the law. And that's the
Yeah.
case with a lot of these stories where people do vigilante work. They usually get arrested or are killed.
Yeah. Well, it's a warning towards, like, dog people too. But it's not just
Yeah.
the dogs, but it could even be not just dog owners, but people in our enforcement apparatus who enable these things. Like corrupt dog wardens, for example. That's somebody who could be, targeted in one of these fictional stories because, again, our enforcement people in many cases enable these things. And what they're doing is criminal also. So that's an interesting, it's an idea. I'd actually written a couple of vignettes about that. I had a couple other ideas also. That was one idea. So it's sort of like the Punisher type or the Rambo type revenge story. I also had another one where is an apocalyptic sci-fi scenario, and it would almost be a sci-fi comedy, I guess, or a really dark one in the sense that I mean, really, like a lot of our, dangerous dogs, not just pit bulls, but all these, aggressive dog breeds, they're biological weapons. Like most of the time you talk about a biological weapon, you're thinking of some, like engineered virus, like in The Stand, for example. But, it could be just, it could also be a large animal, where you have, engineer a creature to create mayhem. And they've already done that. I mean, this isn't speculative. It's happened. But what if you take that to another level? Because you got to also figure that the dogs are protected, right? They're the sacred animal of the culture. So let's say somebody were to create a dog breed that's just way epically worse than pit bulls, right? Something that, breeds like crazy. They're large, hyper aggressive, feed on human beings, right? And you're thinking, well, hardy har har. Well, people would just shoot those things, right? But they won't because dogs are protected. Shoot one, you get a 5-year stay in the Gray Bar Hotel. So the whole scenario, and again, it's sort of like the whole pit bull situation, but on meth and steroids, taken to a whole other level where you literally have a Holocaust, right? These things just laying waste to our, not just our population, wildlife populations, domestic animal populations. And they're, at least initially, they're protected because dogs are protected. That's why we have this pit bull problem, because pit bulls are dogs and that they're sacred and they're all man's best friend also. And that would be a good opportunity to inject in all this dog cult propaganda, right? You're thinking that, okay, the whole economy is like shut down. We had 500,000 deaths yesterday, but they're just misunderstood, right? They're just, they just need the right a forever home. And of course, obviously, eventually that narrative breaks down as civilization does. I think that would be, particularly people who are into like the zombie genre, that would be a really interesting story. It was sort of an interesting, apocalyptic type, situation. I think people get a kick out of it, particularly because it would have lots of good, gun porn and things like that. So that was my idea number 2. And actually, I think there's probably some good short story ideas there also. Also some good video game ideas. Because you've got these like these ultra murder mutts just everywhere. Good first person shooter opportunity, right? And then you've got the NPC saying, "Oh, he just needs a right forever home. He's just misunderstood." So you have as these things happening because you're talking about dogs with the same capacity as a creature in Alien or maybe a velociraptor, right? But they're like, oh yeah, they're just misunderstood. They just need to write forever home. They just, need more, they just need more training, right? All these like, basically insipid, narrative assertions that dog people always make. Literally, like, and the whole city is in ruins. You can't step outside without being shredded by one of these things. I think actually that would be a great video game. That would be awesome. It's like a first person video game. We got to come up with a right science fiction premise for it. So I think that's my idea number 2. Idea number 3, actually I had 4 ideas. So idea number 3 is a supernatural thriller, like a supernatural horror story. Going back to one of my earlier narratives was that, there's a huge injustice here. We have like innocent children being murdered in horrible ways, and there's no justice, none. And you think something like that, I mean, obviously it gets people outraged, but something like that is a good supernatural thriller trope.
Oh.
Yeah, this happened. I was on a hike a few months ago. I was hiking, and this thing hit my brain like around a 308 going 3,000 feet per second. I was like, wow, that would be totally awesome. Because, I was like referring back to or referencing, popular culture. There was one of my favorite ghost stories, one of my favorite ghost movies is The Changeling. There's actually multiple movies called The Changeling because Clint Eastwood made one in the 90s, but that's not what I'm talking about. Around 1980, a ghost story movie came out called The Changeling, and George C. Scott was in it. And it's definitely, if you like ghost stories, it's a must watch. I really enjoyed this movie. Like a lot of those movies, the ending got a little wacky, but and I'm going to spoil it. So people, it's like, you don't want it spoiled, skip forward to 3-4 minutes. But have you seen that? You know about it?
No, I haven't.
Okay, you should watch it. If you like ghost stories, it's a must watch. So the plot line is George C. Scott, he's a music composer, and he lives in, I think, in New York. It's in Northeast someplace. Wife and kid are killed in a car accident. So, his grief, he just needs to start over. So he relocates to, I believe it's Washington State. It's the Pacific Northwest, and rents this huge Gothic mansion. So, of course, what's going to happen there, right? And he gets a job at a local college teaching, as a music teacher, basically, right? So, of course, obviously, it turns out that this house he's renting is haunted by the ghost of a young boy. But he's not terrified. He's like most of these haunted house stories. Like, why don't they just, okay, fine. If it's got a ghost, just move out, right? That's what dog people say. If you don't like listen to the neighbor's dog bark, just move out, right? But the thing is, and you remember too at the time, like George C. Scott, he'd played Patton, General Patton in a movie. So he's not scared by ghosts. So he's intrigued by it. He's like, what does this kid want? Like, what's going on here? So he actually tries to, he doesn't move out. He tries to find out more about it. Why is this kid haunting this house? And it turns out, it was a little boy who was murdered, and there was no justice, right? He was just killed. He was buried, covered up, and nobody knew about it. So he was sort of this soul trying to get some justice, right? Now you think about this space. Think about, and I'm not a really religious person. I'm not really into the supernatural, but we would have, if for somebody who did believe that stuff, we would have a lot of lost souls in this space. all these kids that were killed, perhaps flat out murdered, either maybe even by their parents' dogs or perhaps a neighborhood dog. Nothing was done about it. In fact, most of the time, the kid was probably blamed for it. Oh, they picked, you know why they got their head torn off? Because they picked a ball up off the ground. Talk about an injustice. So you think about that type of scenario. You talk about a soul that won't rest or a spirit that's enraged. It would be one of those, well, as the kids or the adults too, perhaps, it would be one of them. That is a soul seeking justice. So that's my third idea, right? You've got, the spirit of a kid killed by a dog owner, perhaps even the dog too. They just walk away without a care in the world, right?
I like that idea. I think that's my favorite so far.
That's an idea worth exploring. And the fourth idea I had was more like a small story, I guess, but it's probably interesting, would be a family drama along the lines of one of these Tales from the Doghouse situation, where, and you could do that. I mean, people write these stories about folks with drug addictions, gambling addictions, and so forth. It'd be interesting to write a story about a dog addiction where you hear about this stuff all the time. Someone's dog addiction destroys a family, destroys a marriage, estranges kids, right? Because somebody brings a dog into the home and just allows it to just like ruin everybody's life. It's kind of a small story. I mean, perhaps it's not as compelling as these other three, but I think that would gain, sort of the family drama. But I think that would be interesting to explore also. Again, as a fictional story, it would be lightly fictionalized. I mean, again, it would be based on a lot of these Tales from the Doghouse kind of situations, but because that's an aspect of this. I mean, it's not really a public policy issue, really, but you could see, but it's something that impacts a lot of people, and I think it would be interesting. And it would also, like, if something like that caught on, if it went viral, it would, clue a lot of people into the problem. So.
Yeah, with something like that, with the family drama going on, there's so many news reports to draw direct inspiration from, and it would be if it is going to be so easy to vilify dog owners. All you have to do is read any number of news reports. So it's what gets people emotional and what gets people upset is when they see these antagonists in action. And there is this awful case that IHD covered a year ago or something, where this lady had like 60 dogs in the home, and she, like, the children were starving. They were starving, and the puppies are like, there's dog shit everywhere. If that's not bad enough, this mother forces her children to eat dog shit.
Oh my God.
Like that is
that's
horrible.
like, I mean, what happened to the mother? I like to check that out, because that's a violent assault. I mean, she should go to prison for decades for something like that.
Oh, she did. Yeah.
Oh, good. Well,
she got arrested. Good. Yeah. The kids, they got the kids taken care of, but it's like those poor children needing to put up with that. That's a great story source right there.
Yeah, I think the thing to do is to, I had some thoughts on, the content, more like general ideas on how to present these things. But I think it would be interesting to present a story like that. It's a process, right? Where you have character arcs, where maybe somebody like that starts off as kind of a normal person, but they're gradually corrupted by, dog cult propaganda. pressure from other dog people, particularly in social media. And it just, as it goes along, it just gets darker and darker and darker. And that's the kind of thing that makes stories interesting. It's these, like I said, these character arcs. Because I had some ideas just about producing some things like this in general, and it kind of even goes into, it's like, why, and you probably hear this a lot, it sounds kind of trite, it's like, what's wrong with, like, say, movies today or content today? But you want to write a story with good, perhaps flawed, but good protagonists, like people you can identify with, right? People not perfect, but people or characters that most people can identify with. Because sometimes I'll read these books, like I'll grab a zombie novel, and the protagonist is it's somebody, he's a Navy SEAL with 20 years of combat experience, but very few people can relate to somebody like that, right? And most of the time, the character is not written accurately anyway. Like, for example, like if you take a look at Stephen King, and I used to be a huge fan. I'm not, anything he wrote post 85, I'm not crazy about. His earlier stuff, like 75 to 85, I'm a big fan of. But I think one thing that made those stories engaging was, his protagonists were relatively normal people that you could relate to. Right. And, not perfect people, but relatively normal people that you could relate to. So I think it's good to have, good character development with a good sort of a character arc, so to speak, either up or down. Because going back to that last idea, you'd want to see how the dog cult had just corrupted somebody. Somebody who might have been a good parent in the beginning, and they just got run into the ground by all these really toxic, poisonous criminal ideals that these dog cultists promote. So you want to do that. You also want to see, like in the story, there should be like perhaps some actual goal or struggle to overcome, because it seems like a lot of content produced today, it's not really about anything. Like, sometimes I wonder, there's all this action and there's car chases and stuff being blown up and people being shot, but you think, what's the point? Like, what are they getting at here? But I think what's important is that, stay on topic. But I think even the story itself should be okay, that, our protagonist has to have some kind of, goal to achieve, right? I think that's important. And I think it also, has to be well plotted. There has to be some kind of, meaningful story arc. Again, it's not just, everything's not just an excuse to transition into the next shootout or bombing or head exploding or whatever. Those are just some, thoughts I had. The other thought I had too, and I just had this thought today because, most of this stuff for us is pretty ambitious. I'm thinking, maybe some of these stories I just mentioned, I could probably crank out a short story and maybe try to get it published. I've never done that. But, there's a first time for everything. Try to get it, published in, one of these magazines or something. But the other thought I had, I think I would try that first. That, I was talking for myself, folks can do whatever they want. But the other thought I had was, look, there's some good ideas here, but it might be useful to, and I don't want to say we don't have the talent. That's not the point I'm trying to make, but it might be interesting to see if we could get a name talent to take on one of these projects. right? Like, I don't think Stephen King would do it. I don't know if he's even still writing, but there's other, because we have these, the horror story and science fiction type stories. Would somebody who is active in those one or more of those genres be interested in working up those ideas? Maybe it would be worth, approaching one of those people or getting him to co-author it. The problem is that the subject matter is so taboo that finding somebody who would take that on is very difficult, at least in the current zeitgeist. That's my only thought. So
yeah, they would probably have to, if they really care about their privacy and safety, they would probably need to be under an alias, because
yeah.
there have been like the book The Misunderstood Nanny Dog by James Thomas Beasley.
Yep.
He would, if I could somehow get in contact with this person, maybe they have an email, I feel like they would probably want to work under an alias so that people don't come to their house with pitchforks and torches.
Yeah. Well, a lot of times, if it's a name, well, he wrote, because I read that. Actually, I read it twice and I reviewed it on the blog, his book. And actually, I've communicated with him directly. And he does write well. That was nonfiction. I don't know if it really reached a lot of people. I'm thinking more like, I said, I don't know if Stephen King would take on something like this, although he did write Cujo, but that was 40 years ago when this, well, first of all, Cujo is not really an anti-dog book per se, or even anti-dog owner. And that was also 40 years ago when the whole cultural climate was different. I'm gonna hold on a second. But so there's a few authors I thought of, who would, because some of these ideas, particularly at this stage, are pretty loopy.
Mm-hmm.
Not there's anything wrong with that, but what's interesting, you want to talk about another, cultural reference was, who would write a book like, particularly like that, like the sci-fi horror concept, or perhaps a supernatural horror concept, would write a book like that, I think, was, I don't know if you ever heard of an author named Graham Masterton.
No.
Graham Masterton, he's a British author. He's about the same age as Stephen King. I don't know if he's still writing, but I've read a few of his books, and that guy would write the nuttiest stuff. I mean, but it's very readable. Like, he's a really good writer, but he would take just the craziest idea and make it work. He wrote because I was just thinking about this today. He wrote a book back in the 70s. It was or not a sci-fi, it was a supernatural horror story called The Manitou. And he wrote the book, and the book was made into a movie probably a little later, like late 70s, early 80s. Not in this space. It had really nothing. I don't recall it had anything to do with animals, but this was like the loopiest thing you ever saw, but he actually made it work. Like, it was a very readable book. The movie is fun to watch. I mean, you're watching this, it's like, what was this guy smoking? But I don't know if he's still working or not, but, he is somebody who, and he's a, name author. He has, tons of bestsellers. Like I said, movies were made from his books. But that's a kind of person who would write one of these stories, and not only write it, but actually get it recognized. But would somebody like him be interested in taking on one of these projects? I don't know, but that was a thought I had, was to try to get a name author involved and see if they would at least help out with a project. But I don't know. But Anyway, we're coming up on the hour. You know, I was going to open up the call to some of the other folks. Did you have it? We could talk about this some more. I mean, this has been great. We're just getting the ball rolling. Do you have any other thoughts on this?
Not really, but if
Yeah.
I do later, then we can just have another call like this because
Yeah.
there's a lot to discuss.
There's a lot to discuss. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to open up the call to the other folks. Let me see if any of them will join. I'm getting kind of tired myself, but
Yeah, I have to head out actually.
yeah. All right. Well, yeah, it's great talking to you. And maybe you know what? Like I always say, the journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step. Maybe I'll just start working on one of these things. You know, just maybe, get a short story out there. And sometimes a lot of full-length novels start off that way.
Sure.
It's not uncommon. Many name authors do that. So. Let's see. I don't want to go there. Do we have anybody else? If I do an invite, let me see if I can Skype contacts. So let's see. Why don't I have animal abuse in Hungary in here? Anyway, I know Joe is back from his vacation, so he's back in the doghouse.
Yes, he has stories to tell as well.
Oh, Darkcastle is on. What's up, man?
Hey, what's up?
Yeah, we're having a blast. Actually, Chef and I were on. We're having kind of a quasi-private conversation, but you get caught up on it later. So, yeah, I wanted to. We were talking about sort of dog critic art, material. So, why can't I get? Where's animal abuse in Hungary? Why can't I add him to the group? I should be able to. Is he no longer one of my Skype contacts? Anyway, yeah, so I put it out on the hold on, let me see if I can get him on here. I'd like to talk to him also. Get him on here. Oh, Chef, did you invite, who's this
Oh, yes.
Claramaic Cipher?
Yes.
Is that somebody?
Cypher has left a lot of comments on all of our videos.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, very cool. So I can't picture any off the top of my head, but yeah, that's cool. That's cool.
But I gotta head out. Good talking to you, though.
I will catch you later.
Yeah.
Hold on. Hang on a second, Darkcastle. I want to. Oh,
Hello.
Joe is there. What is up?
Hello, guys. How's it going?
How's life back in the doghouse?
Yeah, well, I would like to say it's great to be back home, but that would be a lie. Obviously. Yeah, how are you guys doing?
I'm hanging in. I don't know if you've listened to the last few videos or been following the Discord, but I got it was actually last Friday. Yeah, I went ballistic on the dog owner across the street.
Yeah, I heard that. Yeah.
Yeah, and actually, I heard it was interesting. That night there was more barking, just for like a minute or two. I went outside to really not to confront them, but just record it, and then it stopped. They brought the dog in, and I'm knocking on wood with both hands. I haven't heard a peep out of them since then. So I guess, as you know, though, it's like it doesn't last. I'm still on edge. So
yeah.
Like I said, the fun never stops.
Yeah.
So what's next for you? It's like how's the gig look in Austria? You got the job? I mean, everything's locked in there, or?
Yeah, it's that should be more or less settled. Yeah.
Good.
Fortunately.
Good.
So, but yeah, I mean, I came home a few days ago, and it was just so unbearable, the barking here, that I just decided I can't take an entire month here. And a friend of mine, we actually decided that we are just going to rent an apartment for the second half of August in Vienna, and like I'm just going to pack my stuff up and to just escape to Vienna for the last 2 weeks then, because it's just unbearable, really. I
It
just really
is.
thought
It
I'm
is
going to get
unbearable.
violent now, but it's these people are insane. They're just absolutely insane.
Jeez. That's
And yeah,
Yeah, that's terrible. And it does, people got to realize, people talk. I mean, the thing is, so many people in this space are focused on all these like really spectacular outcomes. But the point I've made a few times is that, the neighbor, or in your case, the 5 or 6 neighbors with the endlessly barking dogs, it creates a special kind of hell that you really don't appreciate until you've actually been through it.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I mean, you'd never think somebody who hasn't been through it, they're like, whatever, it's not a couple of yaps. It's like literally, and even the last time I went through this, even just recently with this dog, it's like you're just sitting there and it's like, woof!
yeah,
And it makes you
exactly.
jump. You're like, whoa, it's like somebody coming up behind you and saying boo, and then you kind of calm down a little and then it's woof,
Yeah,
and it's like, what the hell? This is harassment. It is. It's literally it's legalized terrorism.
absolutely.
Because it just goes on and like I said, last Friday it went on for 3 hours. I
Yeah,
was I was ready to kill that little shit. I went outside and yelled at him. I don't know if you saw it. I even put that onto the Discord. I didn't know if he was going to escalate,
mm,
but I tell you, I wanted to strangle him. I was like, you
yeah,
little shit. Like, what the hell? He's like, well, I'm just cleaning out the house. And that, like, what enables you to dog noise pollute the neighborhood? How? What the hell does that have to do with anything?
yeah,
Shut him up. Jeez.
yeah. It's
God, they're just the worst people. They really are. Um,
yeah, and actually, Darkcastle. Hello, by the way. Um, you wrote something in the chat. I think in the Discord. I think it was with Sheepy. You had a longer exchange where you said that after being subjected to this for an extended period of time, you're just not the same person anymore. And this is 100% true. You just
yep,
aren't.
you're
Like
not.
I'm not the
Oh,
same person as 2 years ago. Like you'll just be scarred for life for that. I mean, I personally, when I hear a dog now, like even bark twice, then I already like go through the roof almost.
yep.
And you just become so sensitive to this nonsense that, and I really hope that this is actually going to kind of disappear again, this sensitivity. But I mean, I'm not quite sure about that anymore. And yeah, so
Yeah, well, it does, and you're right. It changes you. I know Kidder and I were talking about that. Like, and it's not just dealing with the dog itself; it's a whole experience. And I think what you're talking about is, well, among other things, it makes you hyper vigilant. Like you're always listening for it. It happens to people who've been subject to, barking, dangerous dogs, like people who are threatened by dogs or attacked by them. As you become hyper vigilant, you're always watching out for it.
yeah,
So
exactly.
there's that. So I guess it's a form of PTSD, I guess.
Yeah,
And
well, I
also,
guess you can say so.
I found we should discuss this in the blog. That we brought up. We had a really long. We had a bunch of really long conversations about this, and I said this, a lot of people said this, it's like, yeah, you're not the same person. There's a before and an after. And I find even like in my case, compared to who I was 15, 20 years ago, I'm like way more likely to escalate or use force to resolve a situation than I was.
Mm-hmm.
Because, because once you've been subjected to this and you lose tolerance for it, right? Because if you even take what happened last Friday, 20 years ago, I probably would have given them more flexibility on it, but I'm not now. Because like you said, you actually, because your tolerance for this stuff goes down. Okay, it goes down. So you have less patience with these people.
Yeah.
Right. And because you know what? It's like, and even with my thing, it's interesting, is about a year ago, I'd actually talked to them about this. Not that the dog was a problem then, it wasn't, but I made the points like, you know what? And if there's I could go back and do it over, I would have done more. I would have been harder on them.
Mm-hmm.
I would have intervened sooner. I would have been harder on them. I would have been, escalated further, right? I almost regret not suing them. But that's the thing is, it changes you because, and we were talking, Chef and I were discussing this earlier. We were discussing, dog critic, well, actually video games and books and movies and so forth that we could perhaps get in the pipeline, but that, the injustice of this, it makes you very cynical, right? Just like done with people. May perhaps generally dog people in particular, and you don't want like dogs anywhere. Like even 20 years ago, the whole dog in restaurants or grocery stores thing wouldn't bother me so much. But now as soon as I see that, it's like that person walking their dog, in the grocery store, that is a fucking piece of shit. That is just a gross, disgusting example of what kind of looks like a human being. You hate these people. You hate them because, there they are again, flaunting the rules. You despise them. And what's happening is, and what they're doing is probably the white pill, is they're sowing the seeds of their own destruction because like you, Darkcastle, me, you, virtually all the people in this space, is they just keep breeding more of us. There's like more and more people. And again, you know what? This problem's not going to go away. You relocate to Austria. Hopefully, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. Perhaps they handle these things way better there than where you are. But you're going to encounter this again.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to. But the thing is like, the next time you encounter it, you're going to escalate it way faster. You're going to go after them way harder than you did before. They're actually, like I said, they're breeding their own pool of enemies, their own, adversaries with what they're doing, because that's what it does to people. It changes people.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yep.
That's also my regret was that, with that neighbor that I mentioned from time to time with the 15 dogs, was that I didn't just go hard from the beginning. Like there's no like reasoning with these people. You just need to,
Yep.
call animal control day one.
Yep. Call animal control and even go in like with the threats. Because it's like, there's things you could do. And I might have been talking about, forget about the extra legal stuff. Because obviously, we don't want to quote, we don't want to encourage anybody, but there's legal stuff too. Like a point I made in the last video, is what these people do is a tort. They can be sued over it and be forced to pay damages. There's all kinds of consequences these people face, and that's what they're doing is they're creating people who are more likely to, pursue those remedies, right? Because you can say, so what if you bankrupt the guy? Like, fine, put him out of their house, make him homeless, put that guy in a road with his 15 dogs, let him try to find another place to live. You know, you just don't care anymore. Like I brought up last time with the neighbors across the street. You know, I've gone out of my way to help them in the past, but now I'm not doing it. I see them broke down. They can fucking sit their dead asses on the side of the road. I won't lift a finger. Not after this. Not after I've spoken to them multiple times about it and they continue to pursue the behavior. Forget it. You know, forget it, because that is not so much what you do, it's what you don't do that matters also. But yeah, like with the 15 dogs, it's like that guy was like freaking insane. I mean, a lot of it's just bad luck, because a lot of times even some of your that guy was like a level 6 nutter. That guy was really nuts. You know? So you sold that. Somebody part of the problem with suing or pursuing legal actions is in many cases you have to, disclose that on the, on the seller's disclosure, depending on where you are. But
what do you have to disclose?
Well, I think if you have, like, if there's any, like, known nuisances or anything like that, but it's a good question. Yeah, I don't know if you would have to disclose something like that. I don't know, but.
Well, I don't think a lawyer would take that case. Like,
yeah.
My neighbor's dogs are barking and he has too many of them. And like, yeah. I just don't think they would.
Yeah, you're probably right. Well, the thing too is it's like, but if you don't pursue a legal action against the dog owner, there'd be no record of it. But
yeah, I mean,
I had other
action,
for selling too. So,
sorry, what was that? I missed that.
I just said I had other reasons for selling too, but he was probably the biggest one.
Yeah, yeah. You had to think about what this does to property values, because really nobody wants to listen to. The thing with dogs barking and dog owners is typically they don't mind their own dog barking, but often they don't like listening to other people's dogs bark. And so, but with that said, you got to wonder what this does to property values. I mean, it can't be positive.
No, definitely not.
Yeah, I mean, that's a thing, Joe. It's like with your place, you got to think about. I mean, are the dogs like barking all the time? Like, if they did a showing, do you think that what's a probability that you'd be noise polluted while here they do these things called open houses where basically anybody can walk in and view the property. What do you think the probability would be that there's dog noise pollution while such an event was taking place?
Well, I think that's about 80%, I would say. So I mean, we don't have this open house thing here, but here usually you just have an appointment with the realtor.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you're here just for like 10 minutes, then you definitely have an 80% chance of listening to the serenade. So it's but look, it has become so normal in Hungary that yeah, I'm not even sure if that actually, yeah, I just really don't get it. Like people just don't react to it. I mean, they're just brain dead. I really don't know how this is possible that you have an entire nation of brain dead people. But it is, apparently it is.
Well, but you pointed out, though, because, I mean, in one video, you pointed out that, I mean, not that I'm trying to debate you on it. You took a bike ride to a neighboring town, and you really didn't hear that,
Yeah, that's true.
Because, I mean, it's definitely, it can vary from place to place. It's particularly if you've got, an area where, people aren't willing to put up with it. Because the thing here is that, at least in my immediate neighborhood, there's many of us that will take action against something like that. You know, whether it's the dangerous dogs, at-large dogs, barky dogs, right? People know, and this is what goes, we'll talk about like brain dead morons, like these idiots across the street. They know that too, right? You get out of line with your dog, people are going to go after you. You're going to be held accountable, but yet they go ahead and do it anyway. Right. I guess maybe they're just testing. They're like, is that red hot stove actually hot? Maybe I'll slap my hand down on it to find out.
How do you find neighbors like that, though? Because, you know, the one time that I talked to the neighbors about the 15 dogs barking, they just said, oh, no, I didn't hear anything.
Oh, yeah. Well, I guess it's luck, I guess. You know, I mean, here we've had issues with, you know, like particularly dogs at large, dangerous dogs, like killing other pets, destroying property. We had an issue. Actually, when I was on hiatus from blogging, I went back in, I posted a couple of blogs. I guess it was late 2018 or 2019. And some folks moved in well, I didn't know this at first, but there was two dogs. There was a bull terrier, and they got those really weird, like football-shaped heads, and this boxer mix. So these two dogs were like constantly running loose. And the first time I saw them was I heard something on my front porch. Because those dogs will do this. They'll try to force their way into homes. Because something had like bumped into it. Sounded like somebody had like bumped into the door. So I go over there. It's just pre-Ring cameras. I open the door and I see this box. I see these dogs there. And these things were hideous, right? Particularly that boxer mix. Talk about changing somebody. This thing, just looking at this thing, is enough to traumatize somebody. That's how hideous this dog was. There's an episode from the original Star Trek from the 60s. It was about an alien that was so ugly that if you looked at him, you'd go insane. That's like how ugly this dog. So both of these dogs are on my front porch trying to get into my house. So I open the door, I see this thing, and I like shriek like a little girl. I'm like, ah! And they sort of BTFO'd at that point. But they also went into my side yard. They knocked over my trash can, pulled the trash bags out, spread trash everywhere, right? So they spread trash all over the place. They went from house to house doing this. They went from house to house to house to house doing this. The next door neighbor's house. And of course, so everybody's calling animal control. There's another neighbor across the street, actually near them. I might even have been their next door neighbor, one house over. Told me, because we're communicating on Nextdoor and via text messages, and she told me that these two had killed a cat on her front lawn, like literally just ripped a cat to pieces. Said it was the most horrible thing she ever saw. And of course, animal control is kind of trying to run interference for them, the dogs, I mean. And even other neighbors, like the guy next door, had said, you know what, when I see them, I don't even want to get out of the car. But just think, we shouldn't have to live like this. But that was what got, I mean, even prior to that, some of us would work together on these things, but they really brought the community together. Everybody was complaining. People were like, we were on animal control, police, the county commission. We're like, look, do something about this, particularly because these animals are protected. I would have loved, it would have made my day to give them fatal doses of lead poisoning. But, you do something like that, you get a 5-year stay in a gray bar hotel. So it's like, get to all these enforcement people, these politicians, get off your dead ass and do something. You're failing. You're failures. You're useless. Do something. So it took probably a month and a half, but finally the dogs were gone. I don't know what happened. I don't know if they gave them up or if animal control impounded them, but the dogs were gone finally after that. And it had the same thing happened again earlier this year. Now, I wasn't really part of that because those dogs didn't come into my property, but I vlogged about that also. And even with a prior neighbor across the street, this was like 10 years ago, with those dogs. And, multiple neighbors getting involved, calling animal control, the neighbors throwing, there's no end to this. It's just an endless battle against these people. It just goes on and on. But I guess the good news is like, yeah, you know what? But that's going back to what we're talking about. It's like you have to be endlessly vigilant about this. Just endlessly. It's just you're just constantly on the lookout for it and trying to fix it. It's crazy. And it's insane that has to be the case. Really, they shouldn't be allowed to own these fucking things in the first place. But not only are they, but then they get to do pretty much whatever they want with them.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yep. And that's the problem. But anyway,
maybe if it was your cat that they killed, that you might be okay to pew them.
Yeah.
If it was
even not even then, it's like, I mean, I don't know. You can defend livestock as a cat livestock. But part of it too is you have to catch them in the act, right? So you have to have a loaded firearm within reach. Now you got to be careful too. It's kind of a crowded. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm all for pew pew. I'm a big fan of it generally, but you got to be, you got to show some discretion in how you apply that solution. And that's one advantage of rural areas is like, you can do that without worrying about, stray bullet issues and the like. But even then, even when it's you have statutory authorization to do so, the authorities go after you anyway. Basically, the process is the punishment. So, terrible. So, Joe, like, how are things? Like, how would you rate Austria versus Hungary? I mean, you were in Austria for a month or so.
Yeah.
What's the mutt situation like there?
Well, it's I mean, it is very different. Like it's like even in the countryside, I think you would still have the kind of setting that you mentioned, that you would have people with dogs, but they're still being kept in check, that like the neighbors would gang up against them.
Yeah.
So, and everybody knows that, and so they are trying to they are trying to control their stupid animals. But I mean, there's absolutely no comparison to Hungary. Like this is, I mean, I've lived in 4 different countries, and I've never seen such a thing like here. Like this is unbelievable. And like the only thing I hear from those dog nutter neighbors is that, well, why don't you just go to Romania? It's even worse there. I say, yeah, okay.
Well, the funny thing too is it seems like the Romanians are taking some fairly extreme, measures to deal with their mutt problems. I vlogged about that too. Like with culling the off-leash dogs. So that's encouraging. But it's sort of like, the fact that it's worse someplace else, it's like, you don't like listening to dogs bark 20 hours a day. Well, it could be worse. It could be 22 hours a day.
Yeah.
Well, that one that one nutter neighbor told you, it's like, oh yeah, I think it's bad now. Well, 10 years ago, my dog made even more noise.
Yeah. It's just such an asshole argument, really. It's yeah.
Well, they're all asshole arguments.
Yeah. It's no, so Austria is definitely different, but the thing is that Vienna is actually a kind of a very unique or kind of a special story regarding the dogs, because they Like if you go to Vienna as a tourist, then you will probably not really notice it. But Vienna has a decade-long story with dog problems, and the city council has been trying to get that under control, and they, they're just not getting anywhere. So it's just getting worse there as well, and Vienna is kind of it's kind of infamous in Austria for being kind of shitty in many aspects, but especially the dogs, they have been around there for decades, and it's mostly about the dog shit, which has never been resolved, that problem. But it also, like the barking, of course, was also a problem. And now apparently, as I noticed, the number of bully breeds just seems to go up. So, like 10 years ago, you would probably see a bully breed like once a year.
Yeah.
There, and now I was there for in Vienna itself. I was for a bit more than a week, and I saw around 10 of them.
Wow.
So I'm not sure if that is just coincidence or anecdotal evidence, but I mean, it seems to be the latest fashion there to get some stupid blockhead now and ride the subway with it. Of course, unleashed and of course not muzzled.
Well, that's the thing is that but well, where's your new, where are you going to be located there? Is it in Vienna itself or some other city there?
No, it's in the countryside. It's
okay, yeah, that's
far
good.
from.
Well, that's the thing is that people don't. I mean, it definitely is a regional or local thing. So and it can even vary from block to block. It almost seems like the problem clusters.
Yeah.
And I'd say when people are relocating, it's like, I don't know what advice to give, but, scope it out for these kind of nuisances. One thought I had, you get these little, like a sound activated, audio recorder and just stash it on the property for 24 hours and see what kind of, noise problems you have. You figure, okay, if out of the 24 hours, there was 17 hours of barking, probably don't want to live there. It's probably that's a pass, I would say, right?
Yeah.
Or the other thing you do too is a thought I had. It always seems like the barking is the worst around a week would call it dinner time, like maybe 5 to 7 p.m. Because it seems that what happens is that the pathology is, Fido's been inside all day, like crated in the garage perhaps, and mommy and daddy come home and they don't really want to deal with a dog because they want to prepare dinner perhaps and do stuff with the kids. So what they do is they just tie the dog up in the yard for an hour or two and it barks the whole time. So that's when you get sort of hit. That's like when peak dog noise pollution hits, like in that 6 to 7 p.m. time frame. So you could, you could scope out the neighborhood, just sit in your car with the windows down and just listen, and see how much of that's going. I mean, it's just a thought I had. My preference would be to, get a place where the nearest neighbor is 2 miles away, because that'll insulate you from the problem, or buy a private island somewhere.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, it needs to be a 24-hour surveillance, because I did, check out the property when I bought it 5 years ago, and I didn't really hear anything then. It was like in the afternoon, but early morning or late at night, that's usually when I'd hear the dogs barking.
Yeah. I guess it depends on the schedule of the dog owner, but so it's like you want to, probably definitely at least a 24-hour, scope out of the potential nuisances. They, because, and a lot of it comes down to is they just don't want to deal with a dog.
Right.
They rather than say, okay, I'll walk the dog when they get home. They don't. They just tie it up in the yard. right? Or in the morning, it's like they don't want to walk the dog. They just let it out, you know. I hear the mutt across the street. Actually, I mean, I haven't heard. I'm knocking on wood. You know, keep your fingers and toes crossed for me. I haven't heard anything from him since last Friday, but and he's still over there because actually I saw him, I think yesterday or the day before. But you know, yeah, they don't want to walk the dogs. They just let him out, and it barks the whole time, right? Mostly because it wants, you know, wants some input. It wants some input from the owner. But yeah, they just you know neglect these things, and that's where these problems come from.
Yeah. I wouldn't be too optimistic with your neighbors because you know, that's the exact same thing that my neighbors did. I mean, when you complained, then they just locked the dog inside for 2 or 3 days, and then they think that was yeah, the affair was settled, and then they just let it out again.
Yeah.
So it's really, I really can't imagine what they were thinking, you know, that they think that this is the solution. So, you know, somebody complained, and then, okay, I'm just going to lock that thing inside for 2 or 3 days, and then just go back to the previous state. I mean,
What was interesting was that, you know, I've had the dog for a couple of years, and I very rarely heard anything from it until this spring. It was maybe back in April. I started hearing, and it didn't happen all at once, but I started hearing more and more barking coming from over there. And I think a lot of it was they're just getting, they're getting lazy. They just don't want to deal with them. Because prior to that, I really didn't have it. The thing is, they would let him out, and he would kind of wander around some. And I mean, technically, they're out of compliance, but it didn't really meet the threshold for a complaint. I just wasn't going to make a big deal out of it because it really wasn't, you know, infringing my rights or my interests. So I was like, whatever. But it seemed like, yeah, back in April, I started hearing more and more barking. It kind of gradually increased. And it, you know, culminated. And I'd spoken to them about it in May. I said, you know what? When your dog woofs to be let back in, just please do so. Like, what's the big deal? I mean, you're going to anyway. Just whatever. Just give. I don't care. You know, just give him what he wants. If that's what keeps the peace, fine. But then, you know, like, and it got a little better for a while, and then it culminated in this incident last weekend. But probably you're right, though. I mean, well, that happened with the last neighbors over there. Was, you know, they got threatened, not just from me, but threatened with lawsuits and other legal actions. They got rid of the dogs, and they didn't have a dog for a while. And it was funny. I was on a forum and discussing this. Maybe I don't remember. I don't know if I even started blogging yet. Maybe I had, but I was saying, it's like, well, I guess they learned their lesson. And some smartass said, oh, no, give it 6 months. They're going to get another dog. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not so sure about that. But the smartass was right. That's what they did. Now, the thing was the replacement dog wasn't as bad because what they would do is, again, they put the dog out at dinner time and it would bark for an hour. Right. So they get home from work, put the dog outside, and it would bark for an hour, and then they bring it in. I guess that was better than we had because before the dogs were outside all the time. So I was confident. So for 23 hours a day, I knew it was going to, you know, it was going to be peaceful. There wasn't going to be any dog noise pollution. Still, that was a problem. And that dog would get out and do things. It would shit in people's yards and knock over trash cans and cause other problems too. Finally, they just moved out. But yeah, the problem always recurs, even if the dog nutter moves away, because somebody else will move into the block and do the same kind of thing. There's no end to it.
Yeah. Yeah, there really is no end to it. Yeah, that's
no end to it.
And
you know, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go on. No, go on.
Yeah, no, I was going to mention, you know, Darkcastle. You and I know we've been talking about this probably for months, and I keep saying this. but I don't want to lose sight of it. You and I really need to discuss dogs in parks and how all the problems indicated there. Dogs noise polluting camping areas, dogs crapping all over everything, dogs harassing wildlife, negligent forest rangers and the like, because I've got a lot to share there. In fact, even some very personal or multiple personal stories of mine, because that's another angle to this that doesn't get talked about often enough. Unless it's something really spectacular, like a dog jumps into the Yellowstone hot springs and the owner after him and they both get boiled to death. But stuff like that is the tip of the iceberg, and it gets into talk about people, giving up productive interests, like getting barked out of their homes or having to quit their jobs. The primary reason I'm no longer a hike leader is because of people bringing dogs on hikes and not following the rules. And not just that, but you're like, okay, that happens, but that happening, but dog nutters, particularly in my organization, saying, oh, that's, you can't hold dog people to any rules. It's just wrong. It's fascist, So yeah,
when other people that don't have dogs break the rules, usually it gets addressed, but with dogs it never does. And I was just thinking about another story that I can talk about that happened in a park. It's not really dog related, but it is because it's like deals with how differently dogs are treated than something else, like involving guns.
Yep. Yeah, well, the dog people always get a pass, right? So the rules are, it says like, don't molest wildlife. Unless you do it with your dog, then it's okay, right? That's the thing. It's like, Fido always are, harassing wildlife, noise polluting camping areas. I had a thought too. I was at a national forest camping area a few years ago in North Carolina. And because they got all these rules, but I think one of them was, because they were primitive. So I brought my small generator with me. And this thing is quiet, right? It's one of these little inverter generators. And I have other equipment also. But so I'm running this thing because I'd been hiking all day. And so I was like, you know what? I'm just going to stream a video on a laptop and all this stuff. And I think the rules were, it's like all generators had to be off, like 8 o'clock, you had to shut them off, right?
Yeah.
So literally it was like 8:02. They were knocking on the doors. Like, you got to turn that generator off. You got to turn that generator off. But you see, you juxtapose that with the dog rules, like say dog on leash. It's like, hey, there's dogs off leash over there. And they're like, who cares? Yeah. It's the thing is, every other rule gets enforced to the letter, but if it's anything involving a dog, whether it's a dog specific rule or not, they just completely blow it off. It's another doggy double standard. Yep.
Would you want to talk about that now or wait till another?
Maybe another time, because I was on with Chef for an hour before you guys joined. Like I said, I don't want to cut you short, but I'm kind of like, reaching my my limit here. But it's always interesting stuff. So I didn't really have any other topics. So I might but we should schedule that. I mean, I know weekends aren't good for you, but during the week we can do, well, kind of like what Chef and I did, maybe do like an hour and we can talk about this, because it's an important issue. I mean, these are natural areas that are supposed to be protected, but they just let dog people off the hook for everything. It's an outrage. Shouldn't happen. And you know what? Whatever like imaginary contributions like dogs have brought to society, don't make up for it. They don't excuse it. It's like, I don't care if Fido cured cancer. That doesn't justify, harassing and terrorizing endangered wildlife. It doesn't. Because those are the kind of claims they make. It's like, ooh, we owe dogs so much. Yeah. I don't know if you listened to what I had last week, talking about last week, like with the dogs in the military. Oh, talk about it so bad, it's good. That was like the Soviet anti-tank dogs.
Yeah.
Talk about an own goal. But I'm thinking, but that's another like excuse they'll make. Like it's okay for dogs to do all these really horrendous things because of all these like supposed benefits we've derived from them in the past, I guess. Like they say, like allegedly.
Yeah.
And going back to the not helping dog owners thing, I was actually thinking about that the second to last time I was in Walmart. The most recent time I was thinking about the fake service dog in the cart. But the time before that, I was in Walmart and this little old lady asked me to get something off the top shelf for her, and I did. But I was thinking, what if she had some yappy little lapdog in the cart? Would I still have done that? Probably not.
No, well, you know what? I mean, all these people, they hate human beings. They think that, the dogs are just so totally useful. Have the dog get it off the
let
shelf.
the dog get it.
Let the dog do it. Same thing. If their house is on fire, well, have the dog put it out. I mean, they always talk about how dogs are so vastly superior to human beings. That's all they need. They don't need your help. What do they need your help for? You're one of those inferior two-legged critters. They've got the magnificent rover to help them. That's all they need. You know what? That's their narrative. Let them live by it. Let them live by it. Yeah, you're right. I would. And that's the thing is 20 years ago, I wouldn't have thought of that. I would hear myself now. I'd be like, dude, that's harsh. But yeah, fuck these people.
Yep.
Seriously, fuck them. That fucking mutt doesn't belong. That should not be in any place that sells or serves food or really any indoor public space, period. And it is illegal in a lot of places, but they always get, well, it's a service dog.
Yeah. And I did call the health department, but no one picked up. So I left a message and no one called back, and they're probably not going to. So,
yeah. Well, too, is there's always, that's the thing is talk about the struggle, the battle. Then, you know what? If they won't do anything, it needs to escalate to, whoever the health department works for, if it's city or county, to the city council or the county commission. Because that's what happens with all these rules. It's like everything has to, escalate like crazy. And maybe, at some point, you'll intersect with somebody who does give a shit to be like, yeah, you know what? Maybe there shouldn't be crap hounds in grocery carts, in food stores. Maybe that's it. Well, actually, it's already illegal. It's not protected by the ADA, so they should be like GTFO. Somebody will care. So, and even if you call it health, it's like calling police even. It's like, sometimes you'll get a cop who says, yeah, you know what, I'm going to do my job today. And sometimes you don't. So, but, I guess if you call enough, eventually you'll get somebody who gives a shit. So.
Well, I did last year, and I thought that would at least help a little bit, but it seems like things are back to how they were before now. So
yeah, well, yeah, it's a struggle, and it's you get burnt out on it. So, but those people get theirs, like that little shit mop. It's probably going to get dismembered by a fake service pit bull at some point, because you hear that a lot. Particularly if you're on this banned pit bulls Reddit. I tell you, like today, I don't know if you saw that meme I posted. I was like, talk about punchable. It's like, I just want to hit those people so bad. But yeah, they'll say, I took my Shih Tzu to McDonald's and it was attacked by a fake service pit bull. I'm like, good. Maybe that's like a good use of a pit bull, because your fucking shit mop doesn't belong in McDonald's either, dummy.
Right.
You know?
That's like the one good thing that they're good for.
Yeah, one good thing they're good for. Well, that's why a lot of those people hate them. They say, well, they're not dogs, or they're like the anti-dog. Well, yeah. And you people, dog lovers, basically, created the environment for these things. So you say, well, dogs are people, or they're, fur angels sent from heaven. You can't kick them out of anywhere, can you? Like, okay, that's what you want, huh? That's the way it's going to be. All right, fine. You got it, right? And now, yeah, they made that bed and they don't want to lie in it, but it's like, yeah, it's going to keep happening until they all change. But anyway, guys, you know what? I'm like fading fast. I don't want to cut you off. I love talking to you guys, but I was on with Chef for an hour before, so I think I'm going to close the call out, but we'll talk again soon. So, like I said, I'm going to wrap it up. So this is Animal Uncontrol. And as always, people first. Later, guys.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Yep. Bye.
Bye.
Talk to you both
Later.
soon. Later. Bye.
See you.